It was not a plan of mine to come back to Guatemala and do work. But the fact that I had this opportunity was one that I couldn't pass. Infectious diseases is one of those branches of medicine where you have to be humble because it's a fight against organisms that have the capacity to adapt and have the capacity to change. Zika was a surprise for everyone. As a pediatrician, there was a question about what the effects could be of the Zika virus on a developing child, on a developing brain. ¿Qué edad tiene la nena?
Tiene año y 2 meses.
Entonces este virus de Zika es una infección, un virus que entonces si los mosquitos lo pican a una persona que tiene la infección y luego empieza a pasar a las otras personas, se pueden enfermar también. The main reason Zika became really a priority is that it caused congenital infection.
Here in Recife, Brazil, they're desperate to blunt the explosive growth of Zika. There's no vaccine, no treatment. All we know is mosquitoes carry it.
We are dealing with a disease that we have no information about.
These babies have microcephaly, abnormally small heads and brains.
The Zika virus is one of many, many viruses that live in a different ecosystem than where we are usually operating in. And that is where the worry is in the epidemiology, public health world, that there are viruses in environments that we're intruding on that we never intruded on before.
We know that the vector is present here. The mosquito that transmits Zika also transmits dengue. And we are in an endemic area for dengue in the southern part of Guatemala. The primary objective of the study is to look at neurodevelopment. What would be the effect of Zika in infants under 1 year, but also in young children under 5 years of age who would be in the same environment? Ideally, if you are able to obtain samples at the time of that acute illness and test for the presence of the virus, so being able to identify the virus in blood, saliva, urine, is the best way to make a diagnosis of Zika.
Muy bien.
We know that the access to the clinic is limited because of the roads, because of the access to transportation. So we are not in a place where you can ask people just to say, come to me. We have to go to where people are. We are processing many, many samples with 1,300 subjects in the study. The challenges with the Zika diagnosis are such that the testing has to be done in a laboratory that has expertise. So we are doing this in collaboration with the Emory Laboratory in Atlanta. We have to ship samples regularly to Emory in conditions that are standard. They have to remain frozen. Our shipments are containing approximately 10,000 samples that go from this very rural area, travel 5 to 6 hours to Guatemala City, and then on a plane to the United States.
The study in Guatemala stems from the early days of the Zika outbreak. We knew at that time that fetuses that were infected in utero had an increased risk of the Zika virus congenital syndrome. But there were a lot of questions that remained about impacts of Zika on young children who were infected after they were born. They needed the lab side of things, and that's where our group came in. I had the assay for Zika chicken dengue, and then we were also bringing online some of the antibody testing, the serological testing, to study the samples that are collected over time. The flaviviruses, so dengue and Zika, cross-react with one another in serological testing. You know, even in sophisticated labs like ours, it's hard to tell these apart sometimes. The most accurate diagnostic test we have in the acute settings is molecular testing. When new viruses come out in particular, it's very unusual that somebody's going to have access to material from those infections that can often be hard to get a hold of. ATCC has a huge collection of different viral pathogens.
What's so important about having the original ZIKA strain is now you have a reference point. There are several derivatives of the virus which were very, very important. First, the sequencing, the genomics that was being done. We used algorithms to create synthetic. We went and derived nucleic acid. Not only did we distribute the material, we collected materials from all over the world and standardized them. We were active participants in doing the research.
Having those nucleic acids, having characterized viral strains, allowed us to evaluate our test and finally optimize our assay into what it is now.
The neurodevelopmental exams are probably the most important piece of the study, in the sense that we had no background baseline information of what the neurodevelopment status of these children are in this community. So we are establishing baseline, and we are also trying then to compare the infected versus the non-infected in terms of Zika.
Muy bien, campeón. Excelente.
If you're doing clinical work, you go where the disease is. So we need these partnerships.
Over the next 5 to 10 years, infectious disease research will bring diagnostic testing and detection closer to the patient bedside.
To provide testing locally in the laboratories as near real time as possible as you can have it is really the way to be able to contain as much as possible any new epidemic that is going to be occurring in any of these areas.
Yay!